The massive African grey parrot sat motionless on his thick wooden perch, his steel-grey feathers catching the morning sunlight streaming through the pet shop window. His name was Ulrich, and for the past several years he had been the most beautiful and most feared bird in Greenwood's only pet store, not because he was dangerous, but because he was untouchable. Felix Martinez wiped the sweat from his brow as he approached Ulrich's large cage with a fresh bowl of sunflower seeds. The handsome shop owner had inherited this peculiar bird, along with the store from his late uncle, and despite his genuine love for all animals, Ulrich remained an enigma that frustrated him daily. "Good morning, beautiful," Felix whispered softly, keeping his distance as he had learned to do. "Fresh breakfast for you." Ulrich's dark, intelligent eyes tracked Felix's every movement, but the moment the shop owner's hand came anywhere near the cage bars, the parrot would retreat to the farthest corner, his feathers ruffling in distress. It wasn't aggression, there was something deeper, more complex in the bird's behavior that Felix couldn't understand. The bell above the shop door chimed, and Amanda Thompson walked in, her golden hair tied back in a practical ponytail. The young veterinarian made weekly visits to check on the animals, and she had been particularly intrigued by Ulrich's case since her first encounter with him. "Any progress?" she asked hopefully. Setting her medical bag on the counter, Felix shook his head, his dark eyes reflecting genuine concern. "He ate well yesterday, and he's clearly healthy, but the moment anyone tries to get close enough for a proper examination, he shuts down completely. It's like he's protecting himself from something we can't see." Amanda approached the cage slowly, her movements deliberate and gentle. She had dealt with traumatized animals before, but Ulrich's case was unlike anything in her experience. The parrot was clearly intelligent, alert, and aware of his surroundings, yet he seemed trapped behind an invisible barrier that prevented any human contact. "What do you know about his history?" Amanda asked, pulling up a chair to observe the bird from a respectful distance. "My uncle told me very little before he passed," Felix replied, running his fingers through his thick, dark hair. "Ulrich came from a rescue situation, apparently from a wealthy family's estate, but the details were always vague. My uncle said the bird had been through something traumatic, but he never specified what." As if understanding their conversation, Ulrich shifted on his perch, his head tilting slightly. For a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes, not fear but a deep sadness that seemed almost human in its intensity. The shop door chimed again, and Xavier Coleman entered with his usual cheerful energy. The elderly gentleman was a regular customer who came by weekly to buy food for his canary, but he had developed a particular fascination with Ulrich over the months. "How's our mysterious friend today?" Xavier asked, his kind face lighting up as he spotted the parrot. "Same as always," Felix sighed. "Beautiful, healthy, and completely unreachable." Xavier studied Ulrich thoughtfully. "You know, I've been thinking about something. Back when I was younger, I worked briefly at an estate outside town. There was a family there, very wealthy, very private. They had an African grey that looked remarkably similar to this fellow." Amanda leaned forward with interest. "When was this?" "Oh, many years ago now. The family was known for their extravagant parties and their collection of exotic birds, but there was always something strange about that household. The staff whispered about peculiar things, though I never paid much attention at the time." Felix felt his pulse quicken. "Do you remember the family's name?" "Blackwood, I believe. The Blackwood estate, though I heard it was sold and abandoned not long after I left their employment." The mention of the name seemed to affect Ulrich profoundly. The parrot's entire body tensed, and he let out a single, sharp cry that echoed through the shop. It was the first sound any of them had heard him make in weeks. Amanda's professional instincts kicked in immediately. That reaction suggests recognition. Ulrich definitely has some connection to that place or that family. Before anyone could respond further, the shop door opened one more time. A small figure stepped inside, and the entire atmosphere of the room seemed to shift. It was a young boy, no more than 10 years old, with tousled brown hair and the kind of bright, curious eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Excuse me," the boy said politely, his voice carrying a confidence that seemed unusual for someone his age. "I heard you have a bird that nobody can touch. Is that true?" Felix, Amanda, and Xavier exchanged surprised glances. Word of Ulrich's condition had apparently spread beyond their small circle. "Well, yes," Felix said carefully, "but he's not dangerous, just particular about human contact. Are you here with your parents? The boy shook his head. I'm Oliver. I live just down the street with my grandmother. She sent me to buy food for her budgie, but I've been curious about your parrot for a while now. I've seen him through the window. Oliver approached Ulrich's cage with a calm confidence that made the adults in the room hold their breath. Instead of trying to get close immediately, he simply stood at a respectful distance and began speaking to the bird in a soft, conversational tone. Hello there, beautiful. I'm Oliver. I can see you're scared, and that's okay. Sometimes I get scared too, especially when I remember things I'd rather forget. Ulrich's reaction was immediate and shocking. Instead of retreating to the far corner of his cage as he did with everyone else, the parrot moved closer to the bars, his head tilted in an unmistakable gesture of interest. Amanda felt her heart skip a beat. In all her years of veterinary practice, she had rarely seen such an immediate and positive response from a traumatized animal to a human presence. That's impossible, Felix whispered, afraid to move or speak too loudly and break whatever spell was happening. Oliver seemed completely unaware of the sensation he was causing. He continued speaking to Ulrich in that same gentle, understanding tone. I know what it's like when grown-ups don't understand what's wrong. Sometimes they try to help, but they don't know the right way. Sometimes they try too hard, and that makes everything worse. The parrot moved even closer to the cage bars, and then, to everyone's absolute amazement, he extended his head slightly forward, a clear invitation for contact. Oliver slowly reached out his small hand, not rushing, not forcing, just offering. When his fingers gently touched the soft feathers on Ulrich's head, the parrot didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned into the touch, his eyes closing in what appeared to be the first moment of peace he had experienced in years. The silence in the shop was profound. Felix felt tears welling up in his eyes as he witnessed something he had thought impossible. Amanda pulled out her phone to document this breakthrough, knowing that no one would believe it without proof. Xavier stood with his mouth agape, trying to process what he was seeing, but Oliver seemed to take it all in stride, as if he had known all along that this would happen. See, you just needed someone who understands, Oliver said softly to Ulrich. Sometimes it's not about being fixed or cured. Sometimes it's just about being understood. As Oliver continued to gently stroke Ulrich's feathers, the parrot began to make soft, contented sounds. The first sounds of happiness anyone had heard from him since his arrival at the shop. Felix realized he was witnessing something extraordinary, but he also sensed that this was just the beginning. There was clearly much more to this story than any of them understood, and Oliver's connection with Ulrich was about to unlock secrets that had been hidden for far too long. The question that lingered in everyone's mind was simple, yet profound. How did this young boy know exactly what the traumatized parrot needed? And what did his success mean for uncovering the mystery of Ulrich's past? The following morning, Felix arrived at his pet shop earlier than usual, his mind still reeling from what he had witnessed the day before. He half expected to find that Oliver's connection with Ulrich had been some sort of dream, but as he approached the large cage, he found the parrot positioned near the front bars, something that had never happened before. "Good morning, Ulrich," Felix said. Softly and to his amazement, the parrot responded with a gentle clicking sound, a sign of acknowledgement that sent a warm feeling through the shop owner's chest. The bell chimed as Amanda entered, carrying a small notebook and wearing an expression of determined curiosity. "I couldn't sleep last night," she admitted. "I kept thinking about what happened yesterday. I've never seen anything like it in all my years of veterinary practice." Before Felix could respond, Xavier appeared in the doorway, his usual cheerful demeanor tempered by something more serious. "I hope you don't mind me coming by so early, but I spent most of the night thinking about the Blackwood estate. I believe I may have remembered something important." The three adults gathered around Ulrich's cage, and the parrot seemed to sense the gravity of their conversation. His intelligent eyes moved from one face to another, as if he were following their discussion. "After young Oliver left yesterday, I went home and searched through some old documents I'd kept from my working days," Xavier began, pulling a weathered envelope from his jacket pocket. "I found this, a photograph from a newspaper article about a charity event at the Blackwood estate." He handed the photograph to Felix, who studied it carefully before passing it to Amanda. The black and white image showed an elegant garden party with well-dressed guests, but what caught their attention immediately was a magnificent African grey parrot perched on an ornate stand in the background. "That's definitely Ulrich," Amanda said with certainty. "Look at the distinctive pattern of his tail feathers. It's identical." Felix examined the photo more closely. "But this looks like it was taken quite some time ago. Who were the Blackwoods exactly?" Xavier's expression grew somber. Harrison Blackwood was a wealthy businessman who made his fortune in shipping and imports. He was known for his lavish lifestyle and his collection of exotic birds. His wife, Eleanor, was considered one of the most beautiful women in the county. They had one son, but Xavier paused, as if struggling with a painful memory. "But what?" Amanda prompted gently. "There was a tragedy, a house fire that took the lives of both parents. The son survived, but he was badly traumatized. The estate was sold, the birds were supposedly relocated to various sanctuaries, and the boy disappeared from public view entirely. As Xavier spoke, Ulrich began to display signs of agitation, shifting restlessly on his perch and making soft, distressed sounds. The parrot's reaction confirmed what they were all beginning to suspect. He had indeed been part of that tragic story. The shop door opened and Oliver entered with the same quiet confidence he had shown the day before. This time, however, Felix noticed something he had missed previously. The boy's clothes, while clean and well-maintained, showed signs of careful mending. His shoes were slightly too large, as if they had been purchased with room to grow. Despite his articulate speech and mature demeanor, there were subtle signs that suggested Oliver's life might not be as simple as it appeared. "Good morning, everyone," Oliver said politely. "I hope you don't mind me coming back. I was hoping to spend a little more time with Ulrich." "Of course not," Felix replied warmly. "In fact, we were just discussing Ulrich's background. We think he might have come from a place called the Blackwood estate." Oliver's reaction was subtle but noticeable, a slight tensing of his shoulders and a brief flickering in his eyes that suggested recognition. "You know something about the Blackwoods, don't you?" Amanda asked gently, her veterinarian instincts picking up on the boy's response. Oliver approached Ulrich's cage, and the parrot immediately moved toward him, clearly eager for the boy's touch. As Oliver gently stroked the birds, "Feathers," he spoke in a thoughtful tone. "My grandmother told me stories about that family. She used to work as a seamstress and would sometimes do alterations for wealthy households. She said the Blackwoods had the most beautiful home and the most magnificent birds, but there was always sadness there too." Xavier leaned forward with interest. "Your grandmother worked for the Blackwoods?" "Not directly," Oliver clarified, "but she knew people who did. She said the lady of the house, Helena, was very kind to the staff, but she seemed lonely despite having everything money could buy. And their son," Oliver paused, his hand stilling on Ulrich's feathers. "She said their son was special, different from other children. He could understand animals in a way that amazed everyone." The adults exchanged meaningful glances. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to form a picture, though many gaps remained. "Oliver," Felix said carefully, "yesterday you seemed to know exactly what Ulrich needed. How did you know to approach him the way you did?" The boy was quiet for a long moment, his attention focused on the parrot, who had closed his eyes contentedly under Oliver's gentle touch. When Oliver finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed far beyond his years. "Sometimes when you've been hurt badly, you learn to recognize the same hurt in others. It doesn't matter if they're people or animals. Pain has a language all its own." Amanda felt her heart skip a beat. There was something in Oliver's tone that suggested he was speaking from personal experience, not just childhood wisdom. "Oliver," she said gently, "have you been hurt?" The boy's hand continued its soothing motion on Ulrich's feathers, but his eyes took on a distant look. "My parents died in a car accident when I was very small. I went to live with my grandmother, but for a long time, I couldn't let anyone touch me either. I was too scared, too angry, too sad. People tried to help, but they didn't understand that sometimes you can't force healing. Sometimes you just have to wait and show that you're safe." The revelation hung in the air like a delicate thread, connecting Oliver's past to Ulrich's present in a way that none of them had expected. Felix felt a deep respect for this remarkable boy, who had turned his own trauma into a gift for helping others. "Is that why you knew how to help Ulrich?" Xavier asked softly. Oliver nodded. "Animals don't lie about their feelings the way people sometimes do. Ulrich wasn't being difficult or stubborn. He was being honest about his fear. I just had to show him that I understood." As if responding to the mention of his name, Ulrich opened his eyes and looked directly at Oliver. For the first time since arriving at the pet shop, the parrot spoke, his voice clear and surprisingly melodious. "Eleanor," Ulrich said distinctly. "Beautiful Eleanor." The four humans froze in astonishment. Xavier's eyes widened with recognition. "That was Mrs. Blackwood's name, Eleanor. He's remembering her." Ulrich continued, his voice taking on different tones, as if he were recalling conversations from long ago. "Harrison's back from London. Party preparations. So many guests coming." Amanda pulled out her phone to record this unprecedented moment. "He's not just repeating words. He's recalling specific memories. This is extraordinary." But Oliver seemed less surprised than the adults. He continued stroking Ulrich's feathers, encouraging the bird to continue sharing his memories. "The boy," Ulrich said suddenly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Where is the boy?" "The fire. The fire. Help the boy." The parrot's distress was immediately apparent, his feathers ruffling as the traumatic memories surfaced. Oliver's response was swift and instinctive. He began humming a soft, soothing melody that seemed to calm Ulrich immediately. "It's okay," Oliver whispered. "You're safe now, the fire is gone, the boy is safe." As Ulrich's agitation subsided, Felix realized they were witnessing something profound. Not only was Oliver helping Ulrich heal from his trauma, but the parrot's memories might hold the key to understanding what really happened at the Blackwood estate all those years ago. "Oliver," Felix said quietly, "I think Ulrich trusts you enough to help us understand his story. Would you be willing to come back tomorrow? We could spend more time helping him remember, but only if it doesn't upset him too much." The boy looked up at the three adults, then back at Ulrich, who was now resting peacefully against the cage bars. "I think that would be good for him," Oliver said thoughtfully. "Sometimes remembering hurts, but keeping everything locked inside hurts more. Maybe it's time for Ulrich to tell his story." As Oliver prepared to leave, Amanda couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something the boy wasn't telling them. His understanding of trauma, his connection with Ulrich, and his mature perspective on healing all suggested experiences that went deeper than the loss of his parents in a car accident. "Oliver," she called as he reached the door, "if you ever want to talk about anything, about your parents, about your grandmother, about anything at all, I want you to know that we're here for you." The boy turned back with a smile that was both grateful and somehow sad. "Thank you, Dr. Thompson, but I've learned that some stories can only be told when the time is right, just like Ulrich's story." After Oliver left, the three adults stood in contemplative silence, each processing the remarkable events of the morning in their own way. "There's more to that boy than meets the eye," Xavier said finally, "and I suspect his connection to Ulrich, and possibly to the Blackwood tragedy, runs deeper than any of us realize." Felix nodded, looking at Ulrich, who remained calm and alert near the front of his cage. "Tomorrow we start uncovering the truth. Whatever it is, I have a feeling it's going to change everything we thought we knew about this beautiful bird and the remarkable boy who can touch him." Outside the pet shop window, Oliver walked slowly down the street, his mind filled with memories he had carefully kept hidden for so long. Tomorrow, he would help Ulrich tell his story, but eventually he knew he would have to tell his own story too. And that revelation would shock everyone even more than his ability to touch the untouchable parrot. The next morning arrived with an unusual stillness, as if the entire world was holding its breath for the revelations to come. Felix opened the pet shop to find Oliver already waiting outside, his small figure silhouetted against the early morning light. There was something different about the boy today, a quiet resolve that hadn't been there before. "I think it's time," Oliver said simply, as Felix unlocked the door. "Time for all the truth to come out." When Amanda and Xavier arrived shortly after, they found Oliver sitting cross-legged in front of Ulrich's cage, the parrot perched as close to the bars as possible, both of them perfectly calm despite the emotional storm that was clearly brewing. "Ulrich has been telling me things," Oliver began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "about the fire, about what really happened that night, but his memories and mine, they're the same memories." Felix felt his heart begin to race. "What do you mean, Oliver?" The boy looked up at the three adults, his young face carrying the weight of years of carefully guarded secrets. "My name isn't really Oliver Coleman. It's Oliver Blackwood. Harrison and Eleanor Blackwood were my parents." The silence that followed was deafening. Xavier sank into a chair, his face pale with shock. Amanda felt tears spring to her eyes as the pieces finally clicked into place. Felix could only stare as the full magnitude of what this meant began to sink in. "You're the son who survived the fire," Amanda whispered. "But how did you end up here?" Oliver's hand moved to gently stroke Ulrich's feathers, the familiar gesture clearly comforting both of them. "After the fire, I was badly hurt and completely traumatized. The woman you know as my grandmother isn't really my grandmother. She was our head housekeeper, Margaret Coleman. When she realized I had no other family and that the shock had damaged my memory, she made a choice. She took me in, moved us to this town, and gave me her last name. She told everyone I was her grandson whose parents had died in a car accident." Ulrich began to speak, his voice taking on the cadence of a child's voice from long ago. "Mama, Papa, where are you? The smoke, I can't breathe. Ulrich, help me. Find someone to help." Oliver's eyes filled with tears, but he continued his story. "I remember calling for Ulrich during the fire. He was in my room that night. He always slept there because we had a special bond. When the smoke got too thick, he flew around the house, screaming and making noise until the neighbors came. He saved my life." Xavier was openly weeping now. "All this time you've both been carrying this trauma alone." "Margaret, my grandmother. She knew about Ulrich, but she thought it would be too painful for me to see him. She didn't realize that we needed each other to heal. When I heard about the parrot that nobody could touch, I knew it had to be him. I recognized his pain because it matched mine." Amanda knelt down beside Oliver, her veterinarian training helping her understand the profound psychological connection between the boy and the bird. "That's why you could touch him when no one else could. You weren't a stranger to him. You were the person he'd been grieving for all these years." Felix felt a mixture of awe and heartbreak as he watched the reunion he was witnessing. "What happens now? Do you want to take Ulrich home?" Oliver looked up with a wisdom that seemed far beyond his years. "Margaret is getting older, and our little apartment isn't the right place for a bird like Ulrich. But maybe we could work something out. I could come here every day after school to spend time with him, and maybe eventually when I'm older and have a proper place for him, he could come home with me." "Oliver," Felix said, gently, "as far as I'm concerned, Ulrich belongs with you. But for now, this arrangement sounds perfect. You can visit him whenever you want, and when you're ready, whether that's next year or in several years, he'll be waiting for you." Ulrich chose that moment to speak again, but this time his voice was different, clearer, more present. "Oliver home, Oliver safe. We're together now." The parrot stepped onto Oliver's outstretched hand for the first time since the fire, and the boy lifted him gently from the cage. As they sat together, both of them finally at peace, the healing that had begun was visible to everyone in the room. Over the following weeks, Oliver became a regular fixture at the pet shop. He would arrive each day after school, spending hours with Ulrich, helping him remember the good times from their life at the Blackwood estate while processing the trauma they had both endured. Margaret Coleman, when she learned the truth had been revealed, was initially worried that she would lose the boy she had raised as her own grandson, but Oliver assured her that she would always be his grandmother in every way that mattered. She had saved him just as surely as Ulrich had, and their bond was unbreakable. Amanda documented Oliver and Ulrich's healing journey, creating a case study that would help other trauma survivors, both human and animal. The story of their reunion became a testament to the power of love, patience, and understanding in overcoming even the deepest wounds. Xavier, deeply moved by the revelation, used his connections to help Oliver access a trust fund that had been established for him after his parents' death. The money had been sitting untouched for years, waiting for him to claim it when he came of age. With careful management, it would ensure that both Oliver and Margaret would be financially secure and that Ulrich would have everything he needed. Felix found that the pet shop had become something more than a business. It had become a sanctuary where healing happened. Other customers, drawn by the story of the boy and the parrot, began bringing their own traumatized pets for Oliver to help. His natural gift for understanding pain and patience became a beacon of hope for animals and people alike. As the seasons changed, Ulrich's vocabulary expanded again, but now his words were filled with joy and hope rather than pain and memory. He would greet customers with cheerful hellos, compliment Amanda on her beautiful hair, and tell anyone who would listen about Oliver, my boy, my best friend. One afternoon, as Oliver sat with Ulrich perched contentedly on his shoulder, Felix asked the question that had been on his mind for weeks. "Are you happy, Oliver? Really happy?" The boy considered the question seriously, as he did everything. I think happiness isn't about forgetting the sad things that happened. It's about learning that you can carry sadness and joy at the same time. Ulrich and I will always miss my parents, and we'll always remember the fire, but we'll also remember all the love we had before and all the love we have now. Ulrich bobbed his head in agreement, adding in his clear, intelligent voice, "Love stays. Love always stays." As the sun set through the pet shop windows, casting a warm golden light over the scene, Felix realized he was witnessing something truly extraordinary. It wasn't just the story of a boy who could touch an untouchable parrot. It was the story of how love, patience, and understanding could heal even the deepest wounds. Oliver and Ulrich had found each other again, but more than that, they had found their way back to trust, to connection, and to the belief that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. In a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving, they had become living proof that sometimes the most beautiful endings come from the most broken beginnings. And in the quiet moments of each evening, as Oliver prepared to go home to Margaret and Ulrich settled onto his perch for the night, they both knew that they would never be untouchable again. They had each other, they had their chosen family, and they had learned that healing was not just possible. It was inevitable when it was nurtured with love, patience, and hope. The pet shop remained a place of wonder and healing, where the impossible had become possible, and where the power of connection had triumphed over the deepest trauma. Felix, Amanda, and Xavier had witnessed a miracle, but more than that, they had become part of a story that would remind them always that love truly does conquer all. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of captivating stories. I trust you found today's narrative as engaging as I did. If you enjoyed this exploration into fascinating and compelling narratives, kindly indicate your appreciation by liking this video. Are you watching on mobile? Show your appreciation with a double tap for hype. For more captivating stories and journeys into the heart of compelling storytelling, please subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss a single upload. Your thoughts and interpretations are most welcome. Please share your perspectives on today's story in the comments below. And if you believe others would find this content engaging, please consider sharing the video with your network. Until our next journey into the world of captivating tales, I bid you farewell.